call the meeting to order. So we are going to start with the public hearing. The purpose of the public hearing is to address the proposed setback provisions as outlined in section 8.1 of the land use bylaw. Erin, are you going to speak to that? You want to speak to that?
Yeah, maybe I'll just give a quick refresh on this one. Is there anyone, is it just the folks here, or is there anyone joining us online this evening?
It's just
the
us.
folks here. Okay, so keeping it really brief. Good evening, everyone. Just a reminder that the proposed amendment that's before you for consideration this evening is related to a series of municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw amendments that went to council first in the fall. Most of those amendments were approved at that time, with the exception of the proposed setback provisions, which were deferred following public input. At that time, concerns were raised that the proposed 300-meter setback from the lot line would be difficult to achieve in some areas of the municipality where there are long, narrow lots, and that this could ultimately discourage wind development in these areas, which would otherwise be suitable for wind development projects. So this was deferred back to staff, and then in February, several options were presented to council as outlined in the report. And at that meeting, council gave first reading to the amendment that's being considered tonight, and that is, of course, to require large wind turbines to be set back 300 meters from seasonal dwellings and camps, and maintaining that 1 kilometer separation distance between large wind turbines and permanent dwellings. So just a quick recap. I'll turn it back to the chair for discussion, and I'm happy to answer any questions as they arise.
Thank you. So we don't have anybody here from the public tonight, and I'm not sure if you heard our previous conversation about the technical difficulties that we're having. So we are having technical difficulties tonight. Our meeting is not live streamed. We are recording it. It will be posted, but for that reason, we'll have a conversation if we need to, but we've kind of made the decision that we're going to defer a decision tonight for the next meeting, just so that in case we have people who have questions that wanted to attend or ask during the live feed and don't have the opportunity, we're going to wait for that. Okay. So are there any questions for Erin on this for tonight from council? Councillor Sonia, go ahead.
Thank you. I wasn't aware until the last bunch of material came that the proposed windmills were going to be 200 meters high. And a gentleman from Wishport called me up. He says, wow, he says, I didn't know they're going to be that high. And he was quite content with what's there now at the distance they are from his house. And his concern was being that big, that high. Is there a difference in the noise? I mean, we kind of discussed the noise before, but not with that. I call it kind of extremely high, it's 600 feet or more. So how much of a difference does it make with the understanding that they thought it was going to be only 300 or 400 feet high?
Hold on one second. Erin, did you have something you wanted to say?
Sorry, my trigger was slow on getting myself off mute there. So there's no specific noise provision captured in the land use bylaw requirements, but that is something that is looked at through the environmental assessment process. So they have to look at noise related to the distance of what they call sensitive receptors, and that includes residences, schools and stuff as part of that. So that would come through, and as mentioned before, this is all part of a development agreement process. So those materials would be sent to the municipality as part of the development agreement package, and that could be considered as part of the decision on that. So the development agreement allows some flexibility. The distances that are set out before you are kind of the minimum distances, but those could be adjusted based on what the technical studies and results came back through that process. So for any large wind turbine development, they do have to go through environmental assessment process, and certainly something of that magnitude would. And then they have to do very detailed studies as part of that. And that part, as I said, part of that is looking at the noise. So that gets carried forward into any council decision that would be for a development agreement.
Thank you.
I can't speak directly to the nature of what level of decibel difference it would be based on size, and there's so many factors that go into that, but I just wanted to point out there's the opportunity to consider that through the development agreement process.
you. CEO Muse?
It's just, there's kind of like there's like a land use part of that question, then there's a political side of that question, right? And the political side is, what would our role be as council as it relates to this information, right? So there's no question what Aaron said is the EA is the environmental assessment that is the key. That means that the burden to prove that it's appropriate rests between the developer and the province, not immediately between the developer and you. You still have control through the development agreement. So for instance, and I'm just throwing this out as an illustration, you could have, the developer might say the decibel rating is XY, God knows what that means or what it is. And the environmental assessment says, okay, for that size, it has to be this. And what you're telling me is that you're able to meet that standard. That might be an illustration. But then for us, if noise is an issue, we would say, well, if the decibel level exceeds what environmental assessment has said, we got a problem. There's a problem that you have to resolve as the developer. So you do have some control over that. However, I would be encouraged if I was a counselor to say, okay, first of all, the province knows a heck of a lot more about that than we do. They have all the specifications of these motors and how loud they are. It's all information that's out there and that's well established, and it's part of the specifications of what they're putting up. So that it's a complicated answer to your question, but I just don't want you to feel like you're out there alone on that question.
I'm kind of looking at it with Councillor Surratt's ear here. He had a camp close to an existing windmill, and he was okay with it. But if it's much higher, I'm wondering what the noise level would be. And it's hard to say. I know there's a concern out there, and I had to bring it up because it's a concern. It's 600 feet high. It's a big windmill.
Well, to your question, what we can do is we can get the decibel specifications of, let's say, the existing wind turbines, because that's well established, and then maybe ask the developer to answer that question and see what the differences might be. I think we can all agree that if you're up 600 or if you're up 300, the noise is likely going to be much further above the tree line than the original was. But that being said, both of them probably were above the tree line. So let us find that information if we can from the developer themselves. I feel like they would have that readily available.
Good.
Councillor Boudreau?
Thank you. Aaron, do you know of any other wind farms that have these windmills? Like the size of the windmills that are going to be in Wedgeport? Is there any other place in Nova Scotia that has these windmills?
I don't know the sizes of the wind farms located across the province. I know that there are a number, and you can go into the province's website right now under the environmental assessment page, and there are a number of wind proponents looking at developing new wind energy projects across the province. So there would be, in that, they have to provide a description of their project, and part of that would be the height of the wind turbines that they're proposing. So that would be accessible online, but I don't know the exact magnitude of any of those projects myself.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Surratt?
Yes, to Councillor Sonia. There's one thing that I've noticed at our cottage was if it was foggy, you would hear a little more. It's foggy, and if it's windy, you'll hear a little more. But as soon as two people, you and I, or my wife and I, were speaking, it's gone. If you're just there alone, we had no generator running, just quiet. When talking, it just goes out of your mind. I mean, fog and wind is pretty well known around this area, but it was no concern. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on so that we just close this piece. Thank you, Aaron. So like we said, for transparency, we're just going to make a decision the next, well, possibly make a decision at our next meeting so that
Okay.
anybody who wants to potentially make a comment or bring something to us has the ability to do so.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you. Thanks
Thank
and
you so
have a
much.
good evening.
Too.
That email you sent, do you want that to the agenda? Do
We
you want me to
could,
add
that would be, yeah, that might be a good idea to add, and then there's not enough information to decide, it can be deferred. It's better to add and defer.
Yeah, okay, I can do that.
Okay. So we will now call our regular meeting to order. Well, not regular meeting, our executive meeting of council to order. There are no regrets, I don't think. Nope, everybody's here. So number 2 on the agenda is the invitation to stand and move, as it is there every agenda. Number 3, approval of agenda, conflict of interest declaration. So are there any additions to the agenda? Warden Muse.
Yeah, I don't know if you all received the email from our CAO this afternoon. There's a couple of things that are not here, but there's a kind of a rush on whether we make a decision or not, but there's something that's going to be happening at for the parking lot, and there's something that's going to be happening inside the building to make it more accessible, so that when you're hiring, there's going to be rails maybe put on, but that'll all be discussed. But I'd like to add that to the agenda so that we can at least discuss it later on to see if nobody has any problem.
It can stand as one, because it speaks to the go ahead on 2 projects. So you could say capital projects might be the item.
Capital projects. Do we want to
Yes.
put that under, where do we want to put that? Under decision? Okay,
It
we'll
can
put
be
it
put
under
there.
decision and,
And it can be decision or for
deferred.
discussion.
yep,
or- yeah.
okay. Capital projects, so that will fall under 8F. Anything else anybody would like to add to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, the agenda, do we have consensus that it's okay? We're good? Okay, we'll move on. Number 4, adoption of the minutes, March 9th, 2023, regular council meeting minutes. We have somebody move those minutes, or is it a consensus? It's
a
consensus, right.
Unless there's.
Is there any omissions or any issues with the minutes? Okay, so consensus to approve those minutes? Good, we will go on. Number 5, second reading of the land use bylaw amendments, wind development. So this is the one that we are going to defer.
If it's the will of council to defer and based on.
You're still on. Go ahead.
No, I wasn't going, I just thought it was still on. I should have been closed, but I would say that we should defer that based on the our meeting tonight where it's not being live streamed, and that'll give a chance for people to at least make their comments in between now and the next meeting. We should defer that. So I can make a motion to defer.
Do we have a seconded? Questions or comments on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. Thank you. Number 6, we have 7-day notices. So 6A, Article P40 nepotism. You all had the chance to read that one. So we're looking to, you don't need a motion on this. It's,
This is the notice
Right.
period. At the next meeting, we will ask you to approve. You may ask questions now or then or in between.
okay, any questions on that one? So it will reappear at our next meeting. Counselor Surratt, go ahead.
So reading this to be sure that I understand, this is saying that we'll accept family members to apply. To be sure, I'm not understanding that we're not going to allow it. This is not going to allow it. This is we allow it. Would that be a way of, isn't that correct? I just want to be sure.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Surratt. You are correct that it's, if you remember the last meeting, you guys repealed a conflict, eliminating conflict policy. That policy did not let did not let family members being hired of other employees. But this policy is replacing that and will permit you to be able to hire a family member if there's another family member working in the organization. So, and I can use my example myself. My sister works here in the organization. This policy permits us to do it. It puts us criteria that she can't report to me or I can't report to her. There's things that we need to follow. So that's why we have this policy that gives us guidelines to follow to make sure that there's no issues here.
Okay,
Uh,
no, go ahead.
I'll just, I'm not in favor of this. I'm opposed to this, but I will go with the wish of council, obviously. Yes. But I've never been a fan of having family in it. No, and no question, Natalie's great, you're great, Scott. That's not what I'm saying, but it's just, it can create, in my opinion, conflicts sometimes that put people in a hard position. And I'm not one that's in favor of this. Just, in fact, I'm really against. And I've seen too many things happen, and stuff can go by. I see here the CAO would have the sole decision in some conflicts maybe, and you know, I don't know. I find that it opens a municipality to too much. It doesn't look good. That's how I feel anyhow. That's my opinion. CAO has the ultimate decision in saying if this is right or not, and I'm not saying the CAO shouldn't be. He is a staff person, and he has to decide on if this is right, this is wrong, and could be family members, puts him in a position. But anyhow, that's my opinion, and I just want to state that. Thank you.
Warden Muse?
Yeah, when I looked at it, I saw that it includes family members of council. And that's always been there, right? Now, when you look at that, it says as long that it can happen if they don't report to one another. Nobody in staff reports to council except our. So I'm just wondering why council is included in that. You could hire a family member of council because we have no say in hiring, and none of them report. I just wondered why council was included. That's all. That's all. That's all I wanted to say.
You? Counselor Sonia?
Thank you. So just to be clear, what we're suggesting here is that you cannot hire a brother or a sister or family member under the same department, okay? Is that what we're talking about here?
So they wouldn't be able to report.
So if you're in the same department, you'd have to, and let's just to give an example, this is Scott is the head of that department, and I'm his brother. He would not be able to hire me because I have to report to him. Is that correct?
Right? Yes.
But if I'm hired and report to another department, that's fine.
That's what this is saying.
So everybody reports to Allah, so Allah cannot have a family member, correct?
Oh, sorry.
No, because not everybody reports to me directly. So I would have all the department heads and Scott as deputy that report directly to me. So any of those people cannot be my family member at all. I think the policy, there's a couple of things that
Excuse me, you said the heads cannot be your.
correct.
Okay.
But yeah, because
Continue.
they're directly reporting
Yeah.
to me, so I can't hire,
Yeah,
a
okay.
sister. or whatever. Not only can I not hire them, I can't even interview. And really, there's no point in interviewing them if they're never gonna get the job. But the eliminating conflict, the policy that we repealed was a very old policy. And it reflected you under the clerk system, not under the CAO system. So to the warden's point, the CAO is your only staff member. And I think there may be some room to amend some language in the policy that says that it applies to council only under the CAO council situation. We can make that rather specific because no staff member technically falls in that because there's no direct reporting. Now, that being said, it could be that based on the nature of the connection, that even if somebody isn't a direct report, that there could be a problem. I think the point of the policy, first of all, the policy comes from like provincial regulated. It's a provincially regulated policy, so it's passed all the tests of provincial regulation. And so what it does is it wants to eliminate conflict to the point where it can. But when you hire a family member, there may be conflict, and it may come out rather uncomfortably. And I can illustrate because, you know, two siblings do work for me. If there's a situation that occurs that one or the other, like it puts me in a bad spot, right? Because if I'm having to deal with one versus another, and I don't want to get into details because then we get into details, then we get into in camera. But I'm just saying that is uncomfortable. There will be a discomfort. I don't think we can avoid that. The problem we have is it's a very small organization in a very small community. And there are a lot of people that may be related, and I say that in the most respectful way possible. And so we can't, by law, discriminate against people on account of the fact that they're a brother or a sister, and that's the end of it. We can discriminate on that based on the fact that there's a direct relationship between the two. You don't want that. But we have to be mindful that there are Charter of Rights rules that would override certain instances. So the purposes of the policy is simply to give us the guidance to deal with uncertainty. As Councillor Studet is correct, there would be some conflict. But if we went strictly to the old policy, knowing that it may have challenged us to actually hire siblings, even if they're not reporting to each other and do things entirely independent of each other. So that's the reason why the policy is being reconsidered at this time. Among others, it's not the only.
If I may, I have no problem with actually voting yes on this. The only thing, I think it's a little bit flawed to Warden's point. We have the say of implementing this new policy, but once it's implemented, we have no say. Because we cannot answer to employees' grievances.
That would be, I think what you're saying is correct. And I think limiting your nepotism or conflict to the CAO is appropriate because you may have a brother, sister, cousin, or somebody that falls into that description apply for a building maintenance position and you have zero involvement in that hiring. And so the old policy may have thrown it right out. And so what it might have done is thrown out the best candidate. And that's what we're trying to achieve, the best candidate. And sometimes that happens to be a family member. Sometimes it doesn't. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And you're right, council would have very little power under this, only that it would have all the power when it relates to their one employee. They would have all the power. So it is kind of a protection for you as well. That communities might say, well, gee, Ted, you know, Counselor, we hired, you know, your son or your daughter or something. I'm just throwing numbers at the people out there and oh, you can't do that. That's your relative. And you can say, well, actually you can because this is the law. It is designed to help. Again, I will end by saying that we will take the time that you need in order to either approve or find another policy if you don't consider this one to be to your liking. It's important for me to mention, however, that this does come from an HR professional firm. So it's not something that we created. So I think it's important for you to understand where it's coming. Thank you.
Councillor Digdon.
Thank you. And some of my question may have been answered by Alana's, our CAO's last statement. Just wondering, like, if you were to go to Clare today or to Barrington or somewhere else in the province, some other municipality, would they have a policy that looks similar to this one here? If you know.
Without doing the actual research and comparison, I would say some would, yes. The larger ones would
Yeah.
probably follow this to the letter. I would say that it's a hodgepodge, though. There'd be some older ones as well.
And personally, if I may, I guess no matter what we do, somewhere along the line, something gonna have fingers pointed at us. But at the same time, I would hate to think that we missed a good employee because they were related to somebody here that really turned out well
Yeah.
for us and for the municipality. Myself, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Surratt.
I just wanted to add that maybe to challenge our CAO a little bit is, I know some companies bigger than the municipality of Argyle, probably, maybe not, do have policies where they don't have family members. I do know, you know, of several in the county, actually. And so if there's a charter challenge there, I know they do not hire people's cousins, parents, sister, brothers, just that I know of.
Yeah, and I think that I don't know the nature of what their setup is. They could be a family organization. They could be 7 people. They could be 2. They could be 18. They could have multiple departments. They could have 1. They may or may not have a policy that's appropriate in the circumstances. I would be very interested in knowing if it was a municipality that you're referring to, and we can do that offline. That we could take a look at, you know, what the situation is there to kind of get to the bottom of it. Look, this isn't to invite a bunch of, you know, family members to apply, and we're gonna hire a bunch of family. We've got like, you know, 8 is enough, every department head meeting. That's not really the intention. The intention is to say, look, we can, and this is how, rather than saying we can't. Because if we say we can't, I can assure you it will be challenged, or could be, I shouldn't say, I can assure you it will be challenged. I can assure you there would be the possibility of challenge. And that's what we're trying to. So are there other policies that might look different, better than this one to your eyes? Probably, possibly, very good possibility. We can look into. But offline, if you do know of some of those organizations, we would be happy to hear that out, not to like point fingers or anything, but just to further our understanding of the situation.
Counselor Donaldson.
So for an example, we'll say our IT person has a brother that is very good at, I don't know, what's another department in the sewer department. I mean, yeah, I would hate to see not being able to hire him if he's the most qualified person that applies. So I don't see much problem with this. I've been going down through like all of the number 2s, points 1 right straight the whole way down, and it seems to cover like any uncomfortable situations that could come up. So yeah, well, we got an example of 2 siblings working here in different departments that don't have virtually nothing to do with each other. So, come like work related.
Right.
So, yeah, you got to have some flexibility in small communities like this. That's so, I will probably, well, I know I will support this policy when it comes forward on a second reading.
Thank you. Any other comments on that one? Okay, seeing none, that's our 7-day notice for that one. The next one, 6B, repeal Article C48, COVID-19 property tax financing policy. So there's an attachment there. I remember when we brought this in, when we put this in place. So that was due to COVID. We now know that things have changed. Are there any questions or concerns on this one? Counselor Digdon?
No, the only thing I'd like to, just so you could explain to the people that may be watching what the repeal actually means. and that-
Repeal means basically to take away.
Thank you.
So we put it in place because we had a specific need at the time, the COVID-19. So we had a tax, I guess, kind of a help program set up for people who were having some hardships during COVID-19. And now that things are more normal, I hate to use that word, we're looking to repeal some of these bylaws. Does anybody have any issues with repealing that one? Okay, so that's the 7-day notice for that one. Next is the tent rental policy. So again, we're looking to repeal that one. Are there any questions or comments about that one? No issues? Okay. Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just want to add, the reason why we're repealing that one is that the tent is at the end of life and we no longer have that tent for rental. Like the farmer's market's not using it this year neither, like it's done. It's the Renee's group, Department of Protection and Services have kind of said they're done. Like you can't read the tags on the tent or anything. You don't know what material it's made from, if it's fire retardant material, no more. Like it's just at its end of life. So that's why it's no longer.
That was going to be your question. He read your mind. Any questions or concerns on that one? Oh, sorry, Counselor Dontremont.
So, if it's not usable, what do we do with it? Do we sell it? Are we allowed to sell it or we just junk it or?
Good question. The plan is that we are gonna put it in trash because it's not really for safety. We wouldn't want to sell it
Yeah.
and then be liable for it. We're hoping that we might be able to still use the poles, that are 4x4 poles that are used. Actually, the farmers market is hoping to use the poles for something else.
All right.
But the tent itself needs to go.
Any other questions or concerns with that one? Okay, the last one for the 7-day notice, repeal Article C20, C and D landfill. There is an attachment with that one as well. So it talks about the construction and demolition waste means materials, and it talks about the construction and demolition landfill site in Pubnico, wasn't it? There was an old, yes. Any questions or comments on this one? Everybody okay with repeal, the 7-day notice for that one? Okay, so we have consensus for that one. Good. Next, we have number 7, Department Head Report Recreation. So we had Natalie Dontremont came and did a presentation prior to this meeting. There is a recreation report attached. Any questions or comments? Anybody have anything they want to add to that? It was very thorough. I don't know what else we would add. Okay, we will continue. We'll jump to number 8 for decision. 8A, Nikhil Home for Special Care Tax Exemption Bylaw Exemption. So this is one that we see every year. There is the request for decision that is attached. So they're requesting to have a portion of their taxes capped, the amount of $25,000, so that we are adding them to the charitable organization so that they can have a bit of a tax relief. It's not the whole thing, but $25,000. We typically do this every year. It's something that comes up year after year. What is the wish of council on this one? Councillor Work.
My question is, instead of doing this every year, can we add it on the list?
Go ahead, CAO.
That is the recommendation, that they would be added as a permanent addition to the bylaw. Now, I will say permanent, nobody on the bylaw is actually permanent. It just means you don't have to make this motion every year. But what you do have to do every year is examine the list to make sure that those that are exempt from taxes continue to be exempt. So Bonnie, our revenue administrator, is going through the list. If there's a community hall that gets sold to, right, a third party or a church or any of those things, they would lose their designated status as a nonprofit unless, of course, they sold it to another.
May I?
Yes.
So it says plus the fire department area rate, so we would exempt their, that as well?
I think it's meant to, it's meant to be a cap of 25,000. The fire rates are typically still
Separate.
payable.
Right.
But because we're capping a portion of that, I read it two ways. The first way I read it, it was like, it's okay. But I see your point, like it doesn't actually write that off. It only writes off a portion of the property taxes.
Right.
They will still have that fire rate
Okay.
to deal with, but same is the same. They're gonna get 25,000 exempt.
Okay, so can I make the motion? The
Yes.
Suggested motion?
Yes. Do we have a seconder for that one? Okay. Any questions on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. And as our CAO said, she checks the list. The list was attached. And you probably noticed there were many organizations under the 100% exemptions, and they are now listed as partial exemption because it's not all of their taxes that are being exempt.
Just
Ordinance.
on that, so they weren't on the list. But what we've done is we've okayed the list where they're on there now, so we don't have to, have they requested this year yet? Or they won't have to request?
They have requested to be added in a more permanent status so
Okay.
that you wouldn't have to make the motion specifically for Nikhil every year.
Okay, I just wondered if we had to make a motion to accept it for this year, then it
Then do
would
it
be
again.
a.
Oh,
like
you
it
mean
was
the
after.
list itself?
Not the list,
Just
their
them?
request.
Right, I think
Right.
you've done that by.
We've done
moving
that by
forward.
doing this. Okay, I want
Yes.
to make sure, that's
Yep.
all.
Okay, next we have 8B, repeal Article C45 COVID-19 policy. So at the last meeting, it was the notice that was given at the last meeting, I believe. Everybody had a chance to look at this? Is there moved and seconded? Any questions on that? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. Next, we have 8C, transfer request from operating reserve. There is an attachment. Would you like to take that one? CAO Muse?
This will not take long.
Mhm.
You've seen this one before, some of you. Just a bit of the background is that through the accounting regulations that the province forces us to abide by, we must transfer any operating surplus to the reserve. So in doing so, that meant transferring a bunch of money towards the reserve. So when you do that, just like any other business, in the last parts of the year, when cash is when you're paying the last of your bills and you're not collecting anything, your cash flow becomes a little tight in the months of, I would say now up until end of May, starting into even mid-June, that you're a little tight on the cash. So this is a request to temporarily borrow from the reserve, which is essentially the reason why this is happening in the first place, is to borrow it from them at a non-interest bearing loan. So we are allowed to do an interest temporary loan between reserve and operating fund. We have to state the interest. In this case, we're saying the interest is 0. And it would be up to 800,000. So that means that if you would allow the director of finance to go in and dip into that reserve as needed, doesn't mean that 800 would go right away. And as the cash begins to be replenished, you're giving the authority for her to return that money. So that's the suggested motion. We need a motion of council to do it this way.
Counselor Surratt?
I saw a move, and I'll also have a question if it's second.
Okay. Question on the motion?
We don't see this all the time, right? Is it because, and I'm just wondering, because we've built the municipal building and we don't have the money that we had before, or it's got nothing to do with that at all? It's just the cash is not flowing quick enough compared to other years?
So to your question, the construction of the building has
Nothing to do
zero
with it.
to do with that. I can tell you that, I'll tell you the reason.
Yeah.
So the reason was, 2 years ago when COVID happened, or 3, we received a loan, if you recall, a loan of about $1.6 million. We just had a 7-day notice to talk about the financing policy. So the reason for that money was to finance people that could not pay their taxes. So the amount was at an exorbitantly low rate, like not even 1%. And we were making 2% on our reserve money. So what we did was we accepted the loan, and in anticipation of having applications from the residents, we received 2 applications and only one of them was acceptable. So, and that was like $1,000. So we were like $1.599 million off in our estimates. Because it was a time of uncertainty. So what does that mean? It means that we had that much more money in the accounts and into the reserves. So we didn't have to worry so much about a temporary cash flow situation. This is a temporary situation. So, your surpluses are well funded. The problem is that the operating fund at this time of year isn't, because of what the government tells us to do.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why. So we haven't done it every year. And the COVID years, that's why, because we had that money. So we didn't have to go
I
elsewhere.
get you. I
Okay.
get you. Works. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. We have a motion and it was seconded? It was seconded, yeah. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. Next, we have 8D, veterans banners. We have an attachment, our deputy CAO, so, we're just asking to, basically, are we going to continue it or not? I have a feeling that we probably are, because we have had so much success with this. Counselor Bork.
Yeah, I think it was one of the best things I've seen in our community anyway. Everybody thought it was great, and I would like to make the motion that we continue the veterans program.
Do we have a second? Okay, questions or comments on that? Counselor Digdon.
The only thing I was gonna say, it really, really worked well. Scott done a lot of work on it. Counselor Boyd helped me out on it for down our end and that. They definitely need the recognition, these people. And just because we think, well, the veterans are pretty well all gone, but that's not the point. And that to see their picture up, whether they're gone or not. And there's still lots of living veterans around. Because a veteran is a veteran is a veteran. And so, these people can apply as well. And I'm just looking over Kathy, her husband, is a veteran, Doug Pork down home, Frank Landry, the RCMP, like there's a lot of veterans that we don't think of as veterans. They are all definitely veterans. Definitely second that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on that? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. Then we have 8E, letter of thanks to Rebecca Rose. I had asked to have that on the agenda. I did send out, I circulated an email, I think it was last week, saying that she is resigning from the position. She has accepted another position. I'm not sure if I mentioned in the email or not, but in the 3.5 years she was there, we recruited 43 doctors, I believe, 42 or 43. I think it's 43 doctors. Like, that's an amazing amount. And I just thought, it might be nice if we could send a letter of thanks to Rebecca for the work that she's done for our community. Okay. Somebody be willing to make a motion to that? Okay, second, questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. Thank you. Then we have 8F, parking lot, that's capital project. Yes, please.
Okay, so this was a late item and I really appreciate the warden for putting it on the agenda. We're trying to follow the rules as best we can, but sometimes life gets in the way. So I sent out so we had leadership this morning. We're talking about certain projects. Bear with me a minute because some of it, this was spoken about by Natalie at her presentation. And so just going to very quickly run through some of these projects that are happening. So we've received funding from accessibility. Well, we will receive up to $20,000 for 50% of projects. That was initially for a pathway in Glenwood. That will continue. However, the pathway was substantially changed, which meant we had a lot of money left in that project for other accessibility opportunities. So Jeanette and the crew of Recreation confirmed that we could utilize it for other purposes. So there are two items that I wanted to talk to you about here tonight. One of which is likely to be 100% funded, or I shouldn't say 100%. It will be 100%, 50% funded. It will be partially funded by the province of Nova Scotia, meaning the project cost will fit into what we predicted for the original pathway project. Okay, so all I'm trying to say there, I'm not being very clear, but all I'm trying to say there is that the project that we're contemplating for the interior of this building will be 50% funded by the province of Nova Scotia, and the other 50% will come from our capital reserve. Now, that is relatively new news because we were going to present this as if we had to pay for it all ourselves. So why is that project important? It fits in our accessibility plan that you approved. And one of the elements was, not only do we have to be accessible to the public, we have to consider accessibility and limitations, et cetera, of our staff and other features of this building. Guess what? We're really good at it right up until the point where you go into the staff section. We have issues. So the two major issues are the doors are not necessarily automated. So when somebody has a physical disability, they may not be able to move a heavy door. So that will be solved with this project, or at least that's the plan. And handrails on the sides of each row or hallway going towards the kitchen. So that will involve 7 doors that will now become automated, as well as that handrail. So it was not contemplated in the original design of the building, obviously for cost considerations, but this is why accessibility funds exist. And this is a really good addition for the dignity and pride of our staff that you never, disability, physical, social, or otherwise, are not always seen. Sometimes they're invisible. So we have, but this one in particular is to address physical disabilities, and we have to be inclusive in our hiring practices, which we are doing much better than we did before. And so there's that project, and it has a bit of a rush on it because we're trying to get contractors coming to work. The other portion would be 100% funded by the capital reserve, and it has to do with the extension, the elimination of flooding. So this is a safety issue. We have issues with the way that the development didn't tried to, but was unsuccessful in addressing flooding situation coming from the top of the hill down. So the water will, on heavy rain events, infiltrate our parking, freeze, and then obviously that becomes a hazard to people who are parked there. That's no good. That's not a large project at all. We would do that under normal circumstances with operations. Where it gets a little bit more complicated is we're likely to extend parking because we only realized it after we got here that the parking is extremely tight and can be dangerous and isn't considerate of some accessibility needs and other needs that come into play. You might see some trucks parked on the side of the road in any given day. We don't want that. That's a safety issue as well. So the project contemplates a small extension in the back where we park now, small extension in between the both buildings that we have here. We do, yeah, and that's it's Renee's project, and he's on it. He's on the ball. They've examined that. It's not that many spaces that they would add, and then they would also add 3 to 4 spaces on the road in the ditch. So they would fill it in, and that would be where those vehicles could be parked. And these are in situations where we have special meetings. And we've noticed already that there's certain instances where, again, accessibility very good over here, not so good over there. So both issues have time sensitivity. And that's why I'm bringing it to you now, because they're both included in your capital budget. They're both contemplated to be funded one way or another. We've got that in plan, but we don't have a capital budget approved. So this is kind of similar to your recreation salary request that used to come every year. Well, we got to go out to ad and we don't have it authorized. Do we have permission to go out and put the ad out? Well, this is kind of like, do we have permission to commence these projects, knowing that they're funded? They're smaller projects. One would be like, well, they're both, between the two of them, they're less than 50. And it sounds, it's small, right? It's small compared to other things that we do. So that's a long story. I realized you didn't have a whole lot of data in advance, which is why I'm a little bit more detailed on this request. I guess what I would ask council is permission to proceed, knowing that the approval will occur within the coming weeks of the capital budget being presented to you.
Thank you. Counselor Digdon.
Thank you. I'm 110% behind it myself. You mentioned CAO dignity of the staff, but I'm also thinking about dignity of the public that comes up to this new building. Can I get in to see our CAO? Yeah, let me hold the door for you. It shouldn't be that. We're 2023, folks. It should be push a button. Please proceed down. He's waiting for you, or she's waiting for you, whatever the case may be. So I've worked around a lot of people with disabilities and what we take for granted every day, and that these people can't take for granted. So I'm 110%.
Okay, you willing to make a motion?
I sure would
Okay.
like to make an emotion.
Second it.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on that? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, motion carried.
Thank you, council.
So that's it for decision. We're going to move on to number 9, correspondence and for information. So 9A, Wedgeport Wind Registration of Environmental Assessment. As I read through, who did this get sent to? People who live around? That's what I was wondering. That's kind of my question. Yeah.
Just for the official record, I'm almost certain that Elemental identified local people when they sent this, but to sit here today and tell you that they absolutely did, I couldn't say. But I do know that the advertising went out because it's part of the environmental assessment requirements.
What they have to do. Okay. Any questions from that one? The next one is correspondence from the Yarmouth Hospital Foundation. There's an attachment. It was a thank you note for our donation. Then 9C, legislation supports off-highway vehicle use. There's an attachment that brings you to the Department of Nova Scotia, the website, something that we've been talking about for a long, long time. Sure, a lot of people are smiling over that one. It's not automatic. But at least the option is there now. Any questions or anything on any of those? Comments? Okay, seeing none. Number 10, strategic plan progress report. I don't see anything for tonight.
We can put it up on screen
Okay.
here. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time explaining.
I'm putting a timer.
You can put it on.
Just kidding.
We will zoom this in for Guy. Yeah.
Not just for Guy.
Well, he's usually the one that tells us before we can do it. This is intended more to be an introduction to let you know what we're doing. So this is a spreadsheet that lists every single one of the strategic items that I had listed before. You saw this on the approval. And so what you see is you see a bunch of colors and you see deadlines and you see who it's tasked to if you scroll right and all these things. So essentially, our intention is to keep ourselves accountable for this because they are all owned by staff members. And so if those that relate to council are likely going to be supported by us, we're not asking you to do the work, we're asking you to approve the work to be done. So if there's all sorts of tasks here, the greens shows that they're completed. And then if you wouldn't mind scrolling actually to the right, sorry. To the, yeah, the right. So what you'll see is status complete. And then 90%, 25%. So what I've asked the staff to do is the department heads that are responsible is that they know their list, they know what they need to do. As they do the work, they are responsible for updating this live. So they will essentially, if they're working on a project and complete it, they have access to this and they put it up, boom. So it should be kind of like a real life, or at least close to real life update of where we stand. So, so I just wanted to explain to you that this will be presented to, it will be presented to you on a quarterly basis. Right now, I don't want to get into the detail because I just was really more of an introduction for you. You have a multitude of reports that are coming your way and that have all changed. And we've already identified the fact that department head reports look a heck of a lot like this one. So we don't want like 18 reports for the same thing. So we are growing into a new way to communicate with you. I will send this to you after the meeting so that you can review it. And if you had any specific questions about projects that might be of interest of yours, please feel free, but also understand that it could be old the moment that you open it again in 2 days because it changes all the time. Or I mean, it changes regularly. It doesn't change all the time. So that's the extent of what I wanted to say on that. It's just part of you staying in touch with the priorities that we are working.
Thank you. Questions on that? So we will get a copy to review because it is hard to see.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Number 11, financial requests. We have a number of financial requests as we are approaching end of budget. So we had to get them all in. 11A, district community grant request, San Joseph Church. That would be Counselor Surratt.
Have we give the St. Joseph Church $500 for the cemetery?
Seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. Next, we have Pubnico Point Trail Association, Counselor D'Entremont.
Trail Association's looking for $500 for some Class A gravel for resurfacing the trail, and I make that a motion.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. C, Seal Island Old Baptist Meeting Place Society. That is also Counselor D'Entremont.
Yep, so the Seal Island Old Baptist Meeting Place Society is looking for $500 for a district committee grant for upkeep of the Seal Island Church. So I make that a motion.
Seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. Next, we have Harbor Authority of Dennis Point, Counselor D'Entremont.
So the Harbor Authority, Dennis Point, looking for $500 a district committee grant to go towards additional signage for the wharfs and surrounding area at Dennis Point. I make that a motion.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, sorry. I'm just used to. going through.
Disclosure, I'm not gonna vote on that one because I do work sometimes and get paid through the Harbor Authority. So I just abstain from voting on that one, if you please.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Sorry, I
Thank
didn't
you.
see it earlier. Sorry. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. Next, we have the Société Touristique Bontemps Argyle. That is also Counselor D'Entremont.
So the Bonton, Argyle are looking for a district committee grant for $500. This funding will be used to encourage and support the cultural tourism products and experiences within the municipality, especially with the Congrès coming up in 2024. I'll make that a motion.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried.
you.
Next, we have F, Hubbard's Point Community Center, Warden Muse.
Yeah, like give $500 to the Hubbard's Point Community Center. It's they're going to use this towards they're working towards putting a community sign as well. And this will be going towards that. Nice little move.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded. Then we have G, Fire Services Capital Grant Request, Lake Vaughan Volunteer Fire Department. We have an attachment. they have made a request, significant request. So we do have a policy on this, and we have, explain that to me a little bit more, please.
Yes. I will. So they've asked for $25,000 per year for 5 years. Our policy specifically addresses these types of situations where where an area rate may be insufficient to pay for an addition that is required for a particular fire department. History is we started with Quinnen. Quinnen received, I think they're in year 4, possibly year 5, I can't recall. They're on a grant for a new truck. I can't remember if it's a pumper or tanker. The second one was East Kempt for a vehicle. I think it was more of a rescue type vehicle. It was a lot less expensive. That was for $15,000 for 5 years. So the policy is very specific. It says we'll do it, but we won't spend more than $40,000 a year on any organization. Since that time, we received a request from Eelbrook for, I believe it was for a vehicle as well. And we said yes, but that we would start them later so that it wouldn't exceed that 40,000. So that was approved, and this would be your 4th request. So my recommendation, so first of all, it fits the program, the application fits. The fire chief was very open with me about the situation. You will note that in the application, there is a capital rate coming from Modi. So this isn't just MODA being asked, or Argyle being asked. It's also the district of Yarmouth. Remember, they're a shared organization. So what you'll see is the cost is 427,000. I mean, pumpers and tankers, that's the cost. And their other one is past its useful life. They might get $5,000 for it, which they've included in here. And the last piece I would say is that when a tanker or a pumper or any of these things get beyond a certain year, insurance backs away from them. So it's easy on the pocketbook in some cases, because it goes from replacement cost to like cost of like salvage cost. But that causes problems because you want your vehicles to be reliable and for the people. And so the older those trucks are, the more you risk that's not the case. So this is a request for it. I would suggest that it's not, I've advised him that it really shouldn't be considered in this year's budget anyway. It should be deferred into your new budget year to determine what you're going to do with this. I do not have information to tell you when the other ones are completed, under the assumption that we would defer this into the new year, because this is like a request right at the end of the year. So it really should be deferred into next year. Unless council wishes to do different.
So then this was they were looking for a decision on this.
They will look for a decision. They know that they've been advised that they won't be getting a decision on that today, and that we will likely defer it into next month or the month after. And they're not ready. Pumpers take 8 to 12 months to come, so they're not. They have time.
So we need a motion to defer that.
If that's the recommendation, but the will of council will be
sorry.
different.
Getting slack on these people. Sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Surratt.
CAO, when it comes to East Kemp and Lake Vaughan, do we pay like, they're in 2 districts for the fire department? Do we have like a percentage? Okay, 25% of their budget is what we pay. You probably told us before, but I forget. Do you remember that? You wouldn't mind?
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. Lake Vaughan, we share very little. Lake Vaughan is predominantly Modi. So it might be 10 to 15% of their budget that we might pay. These percentages were established actually before I was even here. So the increases that we've been looking at, always take that percentage kind of into account. The second is East Kent, and that's more like 45, 50. They have quite a few of our residents in East Kent compared to the total north and east. So yeah, around 10 to 15, 45, 50.
Thank you.
Counselor Digdon?
Thank you. I was gonna ask pretty well the same question. So in Lake Vaughan, 10 to 15, you say with Modi,
Opposite
With us.
with us.
with us?
Yeah, probably
okay.
80, 85, maybe 90.
Okay, but I see they're coming for quite a bit of money. They're not using the same ratio there for looking for a loan of money, I don't think.
No, they are not.
I noticed that, and that was one of the things I was gonna
Mhm.
ask. And I'm just wondering as well, when we do loan out money to a fire department, what is usually the interest rate, or is it can be something that can be discussed right now, or?
I believe the interest rate is in the policy itself, and I'm scrambling to
It
pull it
could
up.
be, I didn't see it.
It may not be on the application form that he has put in.
Oh, sorry, okay, it could be in what you have.
See if I can find something for you. I'll have to get back to you on that. I will find it. It's just gonna take me a little longer and I don't want to delay any more questions.
Yeah, no.
So I will look. You got it? Okay. I think it's 4%. May not be. Actually, my apologies. This is my mistake. This is a grant.
The other hand asking.
So the loan is actually the loan that they will be borrowing. That's my mistake. So they will borrow and we will grant that money. So there will be no interest bearing on the grant that we're providing. There will be interest on the loan that they acquire. Now, under our situation, it speaks of grant. So we would just be giving 25,000 per year and that will go against the loan. It's my mistake. I misinterpreted you.
Counselor Donaldson?
Yeah, I see they plan on borrowing 250 for this truck. But to understand our policy, it only allows us to give 40,000 a year spread out over however many fire departments. I don't know the best way to put this. Like some might be in year 3, some might be close to year 4. So you pretty well have to wait for 1 or 2 to be paid off before you can look at other ones. And I was looking at these numbers, like as Glenn pointed out, like a small percentage of our population that is served by this fire department. That seems like an awful big number for us to be supporting. So I would like to see some kind of a different breakdown based on percentage of what we're actually servicing in that area, because that's a big ask to me for, yeah, I won't say no more. I mean, how much is that gonna work out to? What are they exactly asking for?
100, yeah.
125, yeah, but I mean, that's almost a quarter of the whole project. And if we only have like 5-8% of our population being serviced, I mean, it's Yarmouth District's responsibility far more than us. My opinion. So this will be discussed at a later date, but those are some of the concerns I have right now. And I just want to know for sure how the policy.
Thank you. Counselor Digdon?
Just wondering if you need a motion to defer it at this point in time or not, and I'd definitely like to see more numbers before I make a decision on this. And I'd be willing to make the motion to defer this to a later date.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder on that? Okay, any other questions on that? So there's a motion on the floor to defer. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. Okay. Then we have 11H, Nova Scotia Music Week request. That is you.
That's simply that we had made a decision to support Music Week, but it was one of those, let's sponsor it if it comes, and then it came. And there's no motion to support the contribution. So I think your intention was to contribute $10,000, but I have no motion to support that. The reason for the request is to confirm whether that's in fact the case. And that's for me as well as it is for Yasta to know what's going on. So that's the situation. And I know that the chair is present here today and may be able to speak in more detail, but it is confirmed in this location.
Counselor Duncan.
Actually, I basically what you said is, that's how it all came down. And at that time, we did not make a monetary, I guess, amount, but that's the ask. So I guess if it looks like we were supportive of it, so I'd make a motion that we support, I guess, Yasta in their, I was gonna say their bid, but the bid's already in, but with the Music Week.
Seconded. Any questions or comments on that? Okay, okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I,
Contrary minded, motion carried. Number 12, agenda topics for next meeting. Any notice of motion by counselors? Anything coming up? Okay, I don't see anything. We're gonna move on. There's no question period because nobody's watching. So we need a motion to go in camera. Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye, aye. Reminded, motion carried.
I would, but I don't need.